There are some phrases that often come up in conspiracy content. Phrases like, "it's just a theory," "this is just for fun," "we're just asking questions." And I totally get why conspiracy content is appealing. Ancient aliens, lost civilizations, secret knowledge buried beneath the sand. And none of it even feels dangerous on the surface. It feels playful, curious, even inspiring. But stories don't actually exist in a vacuum, and ideas don't stay where we put them. Every theory comes with assumptions about who's trustworthy, who is capable, who gets to speak with authority. So when a narrative tells us that ancient people needed outside help to achieve greatness, or that modern experts are hiding the truth, it doesn't just entertain us, it reshapes how we see the world and the people in it. Harmless curiosity can turn into suspicion, suspicion can turn into cynicism, and cynicism can turn into hate. This is why it matters how these stories are told, and why even fun conspiracies deserve a closer look before we pass them along. Hi, I'm Jack, and this is my cat Daisy. And we hate how much misinformation is on the internet and in social media, so we're making these videos to try to combat that. Anyway, let's move to section 1.
We gotta get him, Charge!
So this section actually has to do with one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Y-Files. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. They have a couple million subscribers or something. But yeah, they make some amazing conspiracy video content, and their videos usually go like this. AJ will hook you in with some insane story, tell you about the whole conspiracy, what everybody believes, and then at the end, he'll say, "So, is any of this true?" And then he tells the truth behind it, whether any parts of it are actually real life or whether all of it is likely just made up. And that's what I love about the channel. AJ tells the truth while making an incredible story seem even more interesting. But more recent videos have strayed away from that, and I'm a little bit disappointed. And the truth is important. That's really important. Especially in one of his more recent videos. I think it was called like the Lost Labyrinth of Hawara or something, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, before we go any further, I love the channel. I've seen almost every video. I don't mean to be attacking it here. I just want to point something out that I think that they did wrong with this specific video. So let's get into it. So the whole Lost Labyrinth of Hawara video is like an Atlantis ancient aliens theory about these giant tunnels underneath the pyramid, and I'm sure you guys all saw those viral pyramid scans from last year showing giant tunnels underneath the pyramids. And don't worry, I'll do a quick section on why that's complete bullshit, but yeah, so just so we're on the same page, those scans are incredibly misleading and 95% sure they are completely fabricated. So the technology used does not have the capabilities to actually see that far underground. And the claim is that like these tunnels go like a mile underground or something like that. The technology he used, Filippo Biondi, the dude who did the scans, was like satellite ground penetrating radar basically. He'll explain it differently if you ever hear one of his talks, and he just uses a bunch of scientific jargon to confuse the audience, but point is it just doesn't work that well, especially in the Fayum Oasis where the scans come from, and that is because the water table is actually very high. So anything underground, anything more than a couple meters underground is completely underwater, or I suppose completely saturated with water is a better way to put that. So the way that it works too is you also get raw data from the satellite or ground penetrating radar, and you can just make it look like whatever. Like the scans that you see on the bottom there, those are interpretations of data. So you can just completely doctor those. You can make those up. You don't need to tell the truth. which I assume is what Filippo is doing here. Or Felipe? I don't know. And since none of us are scientists, how are we supposed to know the difference? But anyway, why would he do this? Well, for money, to sell a book, for fame, probably. Who knows? Probably a mix of all three. But it's not a good thing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. That's not the entire point of this video. Anyway, to understand why conspiracies like these ancient aliens or Atlantis theories aren't harmless, we need to start with how these stories frame authority. Not governments in the abstract, not faceless institutions, but real people. And the Y-Files episode about the Labyrinth of Hawara doesn't just question evidence, but it builds a narrative where knowledge is being actively suppressed and where one man in particular becomes the symbol of that suppression. Dr. Zahi Hawass.
Discovery, suppression, silence. The same pattern, and the same man behind it all, Zahi Hawass. The labyrinth exists. It's considered the greatest structure of the ancient world. It's right there, 40 feet underground, but no one is allowed to dig.
He is presented less as a scholar and more as a character. A gatekeeper villain standing between the audience and a hidden truth. And this framing matters, because once a story stops being about evidence and starts being about villains, the emotional logic changes. You're no longer weighing claims, you're picking sides. So who is this man? Well, Dr. Hawass isn't just a random bureaucrat. He is a trained Egyptologist and someone who has spent decades working within a system tasked with protecting some of the most fragile archaeological sites on Earth. He's basically the main Egyptologist in Egypt. He's the guy. He has overseen excavations, conservation projects, and repatriation efforts in a country that was looted relentlessly for centuries. When conspiracy content frames his insistence on permits, oversight, and methodological rigor as evidence of deception, it quietly reframes conservation itself as a suspicious behavior.
Across 6 centuries describe the same structure and the same location. 2008 ground-penetrating radar confirmed a massive complex 40 feet underground. 2015 satellite imaging revealed 4 levels and a metallic object at the center. Both discoveries were suppressed. The 2008 expedition happened. There's nothing to debunk. They published results. They found granite walls spanning an area of 10 football fields. Hawass imposed a communications ban, citing national security. The Cordier published independently and was permanently blacklisted. The suppression is real, and the structure is confirmed. We still don't know what's down there. Scans show anomalies that require excavation to interpret. The metallic reading could be an object, or it could be a geological formation. Iron deposits occur naturally, and critics say satellite radar can't penetrate that deep. The claims require digging to verify, and until we dig, we have no idea what the metal object actually is. The Italian scans show voids. Now, whether those voids contain rubble or records, we won't know until we dig.
Sorry for the bad screen cap there. I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on this and look into your entire argument there real quick because it's very flawed. So let's talk about everything that was just said. And a lot of it makes sense. It seems rational at first until you actually think about it for a second. His argument is that we do have scans that potentially possibly show these underground structures, so we should dig to see if they're actually there. Yeah, totally fair. In a perfect world, I would love for that to be a thing that could happen, and maybe in the future it can be. But right now, the reason why we don't dig is because these structures are incredibly fragile and because the water table is so high that it would be underwater anyway. So would you rather dig and risk destroying an entire ancient structure just to possibly find an underwater cavern? Or would you rather leave the structure intact and maybe dig in the future when we have better technology? This isn't big archaeology hiding something. No, it's people trying to conserve some of the greatest achievements of mankind and protect them from people who dig before they think and destroy things. This is literally the whole shoot first, ask questions later argument. Let's dig now and then we'll figure out what's underneath. No, that's not how it works because you're going to destroy everything. What makes me so upset is he doesn't mention that the entire video. ever. Like, just think about it for 1 second. And I zoomed in on the book because it tells us exactly what we need to know about why this argument is being kept from us. And yeah, I do say kept from us because this time AJ is the one hiding something. And I get it. Conspiracy theorists hate the truth and they only want to see content that aligns with their narrative. And we can see that with this book, Magicians of the Gods by Graham Hancock. And this was very purposefully put right in the forefront of the voiceovers that AJ does so that the audience can see it. This was put there because Graham Hancock himself has his own little pseudo-archaeology cult of people that believe a giant flood wiped out a hyper-advanced globe-spanning civilization about 10,000 years ago. He has no actual proof of this claim, but to people who don't understand anything about archaeology, it sounds perfectly plausible, and it's a very magical and fun idea, and I get that. But anyway, by having that book there, AJ is pandering to that specific audience. And by not including, the argument that everything would be destroyed if we tried to dig right now, AJ is also pandering to that audience instead of giving them some sort of rational thought to actually get in their heads, which sucks. I'm recording all of this after the entire video is finished, a week after I finished it, right before I was going to post it, because I forgot to include these sections in here. And just watching through this Y-Files episode just pissed me off all over again. I forgot how much it actually upset me when I watched it because of how much of the actual truth is hidden from us. I'm so disappointed, AJ. Please do better. I love you. I love you and Hecklefish. I love the channel. You seem like great people, but don't fall for this shit again. You can do better. Okay, back to the regularly scheduled video. And in case you forgot what we were talking about why archaeologists are framed as evil. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, Western archaeologists routinely dismissed Egyptian scholars, workers, and officials as incapable of understanding their own past. You can see why that's problematic, right? European expeditions removed artifacts with little documentations, split fines between museums, and justified their actions by claiming they were saving history from the people who actually lived there. That'd be like pillaging a Native American burial site for any random artifacts like, arrowheads, and then stealing it from the Native Americans and being like, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about, so it's probably safer in our hands. But we didn't do that, right? Oh, we did? Oh God. What do you mean the United States government has a giant collection of Native American remains that they are keeping from actual Native American tribes that are the descendants of these remains? Why would we do that? That sounds horrible. Yep, yeah, we're doing that. And yeah, that's basically what happened in Egypt for the last 200 years as well, and all over the world. We're doing great, guys. Anyway, modern Egyptology emerged partly as a reaction against that era. It has many stricter rules, national oversight, and an emphasis on preservation over spectacle. So when contemporary conspiracy media casts Egyptian authorities as corrupt obstacles, it echoes the same colonial logic, even if unintentional. The implication is that the truth only emerges when Western outsiders bypass local control. Again, you guys can see the problem, right? And the Y-Files episode leans heavily on the idea of a cover-up. And cover-ups require motive, coordination, and benefit. In this case, the alleged motive is never clearly defined. Egypt doesn't benefit academically, financially, or politically from hiding a massive underground structure at Hawara. The claim is that it's a giant secret library full of hidden ancient knowledge of, super weapons and aliens and gods. Who knows, the Death Star plans might be 2 miles underground beneath the pyramids. But yeah, that allegedly that's what the Egyptian government is trying to hide. That, guys, come on. It doesn't even make sense. It does not even make sense. Egypt does not benefit academically, financially, or politically from hiding that. Archaeology, it brings tourism to Egypt. It brings funding. It brings international prestige. Egypt has publicized new tombs, mummies, settlements, papyri, even entire cities when credible evidence exists. The idea that officials would suppress a discovery of unprecedented global importance requires assuming a level of secrecy and discipline that no large academic or governmental system has ever demonstrated for any long amount of time. What the narrative relies on instead is distrust, not of data, but of people. And this is where harmless conspiracies begin to do real work. The viewer is encouraged to feel clever for doubting experts and emotionally rewarded for assuming deception. Skepticism, which is healthy when applied to claims, becomes cynicism when applied to humans. The distinction does matter. A skeptical viewer asks how data was collected, what assumptions were made, and whether alternative explanations exist. The cynical viewer assumes bad faith first and evidence second. Once that shift happens, no amount of clarification satisfies, because clarification itself becomes part of the imagined deception. And can confirm, this actually happens in real life with real people, hence why I made my previous video on anti-Semitic conspiracies against the Jews. It didn't change any minds, by the way, even though I had evidence debunking every single one of their claims and proving that those claims came from Nazi propaganda and even before that, like medieval propaganda. All of the evidence in an hour-long video is not enough to change minds. Once people make up their mind, it's so hard to change it, even when it's so clearly wrong, and it's so aggravating. There's also ethics to look at. Dr. Hawass is a living person, not a historical abstraction, so portraying him as a liar or censor to millions of viewers carries real consequences, especially in a digital environment where harassment, threats, and abuse frequently follow perceived villains. Yeah, he's actually gotten death threats, not necessarily just because of this, but from Joe Rogan's show as well. He went on at one time. But anyway, academic disagreement is totally normal. But turning a scholar into a conspiracy narrative is something else entirely. It personalizes suspicion and directs audience frustration towards an individual who becomes a stand-in for a much larger imagined system. That system in this case being big archaeology. Hi, Daisy. Hi. Daisy says hi. Anyway, most viewers don't walk away consciously thinking Egyptian archaeologists are evil. What they absorb is instead subtler. They learn that official explanations are untrustworthy, that gatekeeping is evidence of guilt, and that outsiders with I'm sorry, Daisy, I can't speak sometimes. Where was I? Oh yeah, they learned that outsiders with speculative tools, that's kind of hard to say, are more honest than professionals with institutional constraints. Hence why Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse was so popular with random people, but so unpopular with actual archaeologists. Anybody with even a little bit of archaeological knowledge knows that all of his claims are complete bullshit, whereas people who haven't studied archaeology at all don't know that, which is fine. I'm not blaming people for not studying archaeology. That's just how the grift works. And this worldview doesn't just stay confined to archaeology, by the way. It becomes a template that can be applied to medicine, hence anti-vaxxers, history, politics, and science more broadly. So once you learn this template, it's pretty easily transferable to anything else. Again, that's where anti-vaxxers and flat earthers and evolution deniers come in. So that's kind of why this Ancient Aliens framework isn't just entertainment. It also trains an audience to associate expertise with deception and speculation with bravery. It rewards narratives that elevate mystery over method and suspicion over understanding. When a story teaches you to distrust the people who actually understand the evidence, it doesn't need to tell you what to believe next. It's already done the work.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you sure about that?
And I do want to be fair here, because, like I said earlier, I talked about it briefly, Egyptology was not always a nice field. So Egyptology, especially in its early years, earned some of that distrust that people feel today. Not because ancient Egyptians were misunderstood, but because modern scholars were often shaped by the prejudices of their time. The field didn't emerge in a vacuum of pure curiosity. It was born in the shadow of colonialism, nationalism, and racial hierarchy. And those influences left fingerprints that are still visible if you know where to look. In the 19th century, Egyptology was dominated almost entirely by European scholars operating under imperial power. Excavations were frequently funded by colonial governments or wealthy patrons whose goals were prestige and collection, not preservation. Artifacts were removed en masse, sites were stripped without full documentation, and Egyptian laborers were treated as disposable tools rather than partners in discovery. The prevailing belief was that Western scholars were rescuing history from neglect, a narrative that conveniently ignored the fact that Egypt had its own long traditions of record-keeping, monument maintenance, and cultural memory. The imbalance didn't just shape where artifacts ended up either, it shaped how history itself was written. Those early scholars also brought with them racial assumptions of their era. Many genuinely believed that complex architecture, large-scale organization, and advanced engineering were beyond the capabilities of non-European civilizations, unless influenced by an outside force, of course. And this mindset didn't necessarily require aliens. It originally leaned on the lost white civilization or biblical figures or Atlanteans. Yeah, because Egyptians weren't actually smart. No, of course not. It was the Atlanteans that helped them build everything. It was, some other random white people. It was the white aliens, of course. It had to be. Duh. Ancient Aliens is not a radical break from that thinking either. It's a modern rebrand. The core idea remains the same. Greatness must have come from somewhere else. As a result, early Egyptology often emphasized mystery over method. Gaps in evidence were treated as proof of lost knowledge rather than opportunities for further research. When scholars disagreed, dominant voices drowned out dissent, especially from Egyptian academics who lacked institutional power in Western universities. These missteps created real problems too. Entire generations were taught simplified or distorted versions of Egyptian history, and corrections came slowly, buried in academic journals most people never read. And yeah, Egyptian history is actually super complicated. I took a couple classes of it in college, and my god, yeah, it's a lot. Really interesting, but it is very complicated. And that lag between discovery and public understanding ended up creating fertile ground for alternative narratives to take root. The 20th century did bring some major reforms with like stratigraphic excavation, peer review, radiocarbon dating, and interdisciplinary collaboration. All that means is they made some better methods. They had other scientists like geologists come in to test the rocks, or Egyptian anthropologists to come in to help them read hieroglyphs, and linguists and all that good stuff. It wasn't just random archaeologists trying to do everything themselves. During that time, Egypt also started to assert control over its own heritage by implementing permit systems, and it began to prioritize conservation. These changes dramatically improved accuracy and our understanding. And since that led to a lot more accurate discoveries, people began to expect these discoveries on a frequent basis. But as time went on, we had fewer sensational finds, more careful documentation, and for audiences conditioned to expect constant revelation, that restraint can feel suspicious, especially when contrasted with a flashy conspiracy that promises instant answers and hidden truth. And Ancient Aliens, both the TV show and just the theory in general that a lot of TikTokers and Instagram people and Facebook people and YouTubers propagate, that whole thing, that exploits the tension expertly. It positions itself as a bold challenger to a slow, cautious academic establishment, framing uncertainty as evidence of suppression rather than honesty. So when Egyptology says, we don't know the answer yet, conspiracy narratives hear weakness. When scholars revise earlier conclusions, conspiracies see proof of deception. The reality is that revision is how science works. We need to revise our theories and make them more accurate, otherwise what's the point? But conspiracy theorists don't see that. They mistake humility for incompetence. How dare we get something wrong and then correct it later on? Unbelievable. And there's a whole deeper problem baked into the Ancient Aliens framework. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but by suggesting that Egyptians needed extraterrestrial help to build monuments, it removes agency from the people who actually lived, planned, organized, and labored there. It turns human achievement into borrowed genius, and it's not just inaccurate, it's a continuation of the same tradition that once argued Africans were incapable of civilization without outside intervention. What makes this especially insidious is that it feels complimentary on the surface. Saying that these monuments are so crazy, they're so cool, that it must have been aliens that built it, or Atlanteans. They're often described as too advanced, or beyond belief, impossible. But those words are not neutral. They imply a ceiling on human capability that ancient Egyptians somehow exceeded, but only through external assistance. Modern engineering challenges don't trigger the same assumptions, though, even when they're equally or more complex. We don't credit alien invention for skyscrapers or space stations. We credit organization, labor, time, and accumulated knowledge. The real tragedy is that Egyptology's early failures give these narratives just enough plausibility to survive. When people learn that artifacts were stolen, records were incomplete, or theories were revised, they don't always hear the second half of that story. That the field ended up correcting itself. Conspiracy culture freezes the discipline at its worst moment and treats that as a snapshot of permanent truth. It never accounts for the thousands upon thousands of excavations, studies, and peer-reviewed publications that followed. And that's exactly what these fucking conspiracy theorists do. They pick one bad thing about something that is true, and they hold on to that no matter how much evidence they have to the contrary. Like, imagine there's one dead flower in a field of living flowers, and somebody walks up to that dead flower and they're like, wow, this entire field is dead. This is the worst flower field I've ever seen. It's infuriating. Anyway, understanding history doesn't mean rejecting skepticism. It means applying it evenly, so Egyptology does deserve criticism where it failed, but also credit where it learned. Ancient Aliens, the show, the theory, everything, it doesn't do either of those. It uses the field's past mistakes as a wedge, not to improve understanding, but to replace one flawed narrative with another that erases human achievement entirely.
Archaeologists uncovered a human skull, towering at 15 feet long.
Now, this whole theory doesn't survive without a villain. And that villain is big archaeology. And I talked about that earlier a little bit, and we're going to go into it with more detail now. Big archaeology is presented as a shadowy, unified force, a global machine that decides what history we're allowed to know and ruthlessly suppresses anything that threatens the official story. It sounds powerful, it sounds scary and intimidating, and it completely collapses the moment you understand how archaeology actually works. There is no central authority of history. Let's start with the most basic problem. There's no such thing as a global archaeological command structure. It's not a corporation, it's not a religion, it's not a government agency. It is a chaotic, fragmented network of universities, museums, government departments, cultural ministries, private firms, nonprofit institutes, underfunded field teams, and graduate students barely holding their lives together. And that's not all, because these groups often compete with each other too. They argue constantly, they disagree publicly, they publish papers specifically to prove each other wrong. So the idea that all of them are unified in a single coordinated lie is insane. And I get it, not everybody has spent time in academia. Not everybody actually researches archaeology. Most people just see Indiana Jones and assume that's what archaeology is. And it's not your fault. I get it. If that's all you know, that is not your fault. I don't blame you for not knowing something. I don't blame you for not researching archaeology. That's the point of this video, to teach you about something that you don't know about, so that you can be better off in the future. And by the way, this same logic that I just applied to big archaeology also applies to things like big pharma and the whole anti-vaxxer conspiracy theories. Yeah. Just common sense. Common sense. Just think about it. Think about the logistics of these things. Anyway, let's continue with big archaeology. I don't want to talk about anti-vaxxers right now. But yeah, for either of these, geopolitics makes it impossible. So again, we'll think about the logistics. What does a global cover-up require? Well, you would need Egypt, the United States, China, Russia, Iran, France, Germany, and dozens of other countries to agree on the same secret, maintain it across generations, suppress whistleblowers, and never use that discovery for political leverage. Dude, these nations can't even agree on climate policy or borders or trade, but we're supposed to believe they're flawlessly aligned on hiding Atlantis? Come on. The moment one country found definitive evidence of a lost advanced civilization, it would become a national prestige weapon. It would be announced instantly. So here's the part that conspiracy theories never explain. Archaeologists don't get rich. Most of them are underpaid, grant dependent, and working on short-term contracts. So ask yourself this. If you found undeniable proof of Atlantis, or aliens, or ancient prehistoric sonic technology, why would you hide it? The discovery would make you rich. You would be world famous, permanently cited, historically immortal. You wouldn't just get a footnote, you would get your name in textbooks for centuries. There is no incentive to suppress that, none. But they'd lose their careers. No, they would gain them. Do you know how much money you would gain if you found an actual alien spaceship? Well, I mean, the government might kill you, but still. Every archaeologist dreams of being the one who changes everything. So for this conspiracy to work, tens of thousands of people would need to stay quiet. Not just professors, but field workers, students, lab techs, surveyors, conservators, engineers, translators, and archivists across centuries, across continents, across political systems, across wars. Have you ever tried to keep a secret with just 3 people? No? Try it with 50,000. Oh, and if you do see somebody who leaks stuff, like not leaking water, like weird fluids from their bodies. No, like if they're leaking archaeological secrets or like alien conspiracy secrets from the government, just check to see if they have a book. Like, just look on Amazon, type in their name, and see if a book pops up. Because if there's a book, there's like a 99% chance they're lying. Because what better way to sell a book than saying, I have secrets But you can only figure out what my secrets are if you buy my book. $10.99 on Amazon. 2-day shipping. So we also need to talk about what big archaeology is doing to suppress the whole ancient aliens thing and why big archaeology is so evil and trying to keep history from us. Well, it's pretty much based on the permit system. People often point to permits as evidence of control. You know, you need a permit to dig at this site, or you need a permit to use LiDAR or ground penetrating radar or something. And in reality, permits exist because sites are fragile, excavation is destructive, and cultural heritage should always belong to the host nation. Egypt doesn't restrict access because of aliens. Dr. Hawass does not restrict access because of aliens. They restrict access because for centuries, foreign expeditions treated its past like a souvenir shop. Permits are about sovereignty, not secrets. Also, I may or may not go into this a little bit more with the whole pyramid thing, but the water table underneath the pyramids is like right under there. So any excavations have to go through a ton of water, and if you try to drain that water, it's probably going to cause the pyramids to collapse. So it's not like something that is even feasible to do, to look under a pyramid to find an ancient labyrinth or something. Like, sorry, there are just so many problems with these stupid fucking theories. Good God, I'm getting angry. Okay, so who benefits from conspiracies? Who actually gains power from these narratives about ancient aliens and stuff? Well, obviously it's not archaeologists, but the content creators, they gain engagement, loyalty, outrage, monetization, and they can villainize anybody they want. Big archaeology is convenient because it can't even defend itself. And it can't defend itself because it's not real. That's why people like me, or I don't know, Mini Minuteman and Flint Dibble have to do it. And I'm an art history major. I'm not even an archaeology major. So let's compare some explanations and see which one makes more sense to you guys. Option 1. A vast, flawless, multi-generational global conspiracy involving tens of thousands of people across hostile governments, all hiding world-changing evidence with no real leaks. Option 2. Some people misunderstand data, distrust experts, and prefer stories that feel more exciting than reality. Only one of those explanations requires fewer assumptions. And we're going to go into more detail about the whole algorithm and why people do these stupid conspiracy videos and why they get so many likes and views on all this good stuff, because it's such a massive problem. Okay, now before we go into the whole social media thing and why conspiracies work so well, I just want to talk about the pyramids a little bit more. I just want to debunk this whole ancient aliens thing once and for all, because it's so stupid.
Some beings came from the sky.
The pyramids weren't built by fucking aliens. Get a grip. Okay, let's actually get into this. So when people say that pyramids couldn't have been built by ancient Egyptians, what they're usually reacting to isn't a specific piece of evidence, but it's the scale. The size of the stones, the precision of the joints, the sheer number of blocks involved. Our brains aren't great at intuitively understanding what organized human labor can accomplish over decades. So when we see something this massive, we reach for explanations that feel proportionate to the awe. Advanced tools, lost technologies, outside outside intervention. But awe is not a measurement, and feeling overwhelmed by scale doesn't mean the process itself was unknowable. The Great Pyramid of Giza is made of roughly 2.3 million limestone blocks, most weighing between 2 and 3 tons, with some heavier stones used in the internal chambers. That number does sound impossible, until it's broken down across time and labor. Construction is generally dated to around 20 to 30 years during the reign of Khufu. Spread across that time frame, the daily placement rate becomes demanding but achievable for a large organized workforce. Archaeological evidence supports the presence of tens of thousands of workers rotating seasonally, housed in purpose-built settlements, fed with substantial rations, and managed through a clear administrative hierarchy. And just so you guys know, the workers weren't just random slaves. They were actual skilled laborers that did this for a living. These were masons and architects and builders, not just random slaves. And we know all this because those systems left traces. Worker villages near Giza contain bakeries, breweries, storage facilities, and medical evidence of treated injuries. Skeletal remains show signs of repeated stress and healed fractures, indicating long-term labor supported by a care system rather than expendable slavery. Administrative records describe work gangs, shifts, and supply chains. This wasn't improvisation, it was logistics on a national scale, managed by a centralized state with the ability to mobilize resources efficiently. Precision is another point where mystery often replaces method. Tight stone joints and level surfaces. Surfaces? I need to take a break. Tight stone joints and metal surfaces. Oh, god damn it, I lost my place. Okay, I'm actually taking a break. I'll be back soon. Okay, I'm back, and I found my place. Tight stone joints and level surfaces are frequently cited as evidence of advanced machining or lost techniques. In reality, stoneworking doesn't require electricity or lasers to achieve accuracy. It requires abrasives, pounders, and... God, I keep losing my goddamn place. God. Okay, we got this for realsies this time. Tight stone joints and level surfaces are frequently cited as evidence of advanced machining or lost techniques. In reality, surfaces are frequently cited... I think I just forgot how to read and speak and do basic human things. Anyway, stoneworking doesn't require electricity or lasers to achieve accuracy. It just requires abrasives, reference surfaces, and time. Copper tools hardened through work, stone hammers, dolerite pounders, and sand as an abrasive are well attested in Egyptian quarries. Experimental archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that these methods can reproduce the tool marks and finishes found on pyramid stones. What they lack in speed, they make up for in repeatability. And the leveling of the pyramid base is often framed as particularly inexplicable. Measurements show it varies only by a few centimeters across hundreds of meters, which sounds astonishing. And it is. But until you understand the method that was likely used, water leveling. Using canals or trenches filled with water to establish a horizontal plane. It requires no advanced mathematics and was well within the capabilities of ancient engineers. Gravity and water just do all of the work. Transportation is another thing that conspiracy theorists point to. How do they get the stones from the quarries to the pyramids? It's a good question. It's not very intuitive in terms of like how we think nowadays. You know, moving multi-ton stones feels implausible because we imagine doing it ourselves with like 3 other people. You know, just get the boys together with a couple brewskis and some 3-ton stones and try to push them. No, the Egyptians didn't work that way. There's evidence from reliefs, texts, and experimental reconstructions that show sledges pulled across wetted sand. Sledges pulled across wetted sand. It's kind of hard to say. And that reduces friction dramatically. Just a small increase in moisture can have the force required to move a heavy load. So multiply that by not 3, but hundreds of workers pulling in coordinated teams, and the problem becomes one of organization instead of just invention. And no, the Egyptians did not have sonic tools. They didn't use sound to levitate the blocks. That's so stupid. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm supposed to be like understanding and supportive and nice, but don't. People are insane. My God. Where are we? Ramp systems, too, are often presented as an unsolved mystery, but that's pretty misleading. Multiple ramp designs are completely plausible, and evidence exists for straight ramps, zigzag ramps, and internal ramps that were used at different construction stages. So archaeology rarely preserves temporary structures well, especially ones that were dismantled intentionally after use. So that's why we don't have, a single definitive ramp blueprint. But it's kind of the practical reality of large construction sites. They adapt methods as conditions change. So yeah, it's completely fair to say that we don't know every single little detail about how the pyramids were created. We don't. That's the truth. But we can't just jump in and say, well, we don't know everything, so it must have been aliens. We know a good 80% of how they were built, maybe even more, maybe 95% of how they were built. All of this is pretty biased too. It's just, well, when modern projects succeed, we end up crediting engineering teams and architects, supply chains, and planning. But when ancient projects succeeded, well, we question whether they were capable of building it at all. Obviously, they couldn't have built the pyramids. That was aliens. It's way too big for them. Too complicated. The difference isn't evidence-based, it's psychological. We always just underestimate time as a force. These pyramids were built not in a matter of weeks, months, or years, but decades. Decades of consistent labor, incremental improvements, and accumulated expertise, and that can produce results that feel miraculous. Also, just real quick side note, because this always comes up with these dumb pyramid conspiracies. Obviously, we have pyramid-like structures all over the world, and a lot of people ask the question, well, how did all of these ancient civilizations know how to build pyramids, huh? It's got to be evidence of aliens. And to that, I just want to ask you a question back. Have you ever tried to stack rocks? Do you know what the best way to stack rocks up is? Yeah, it's a goddamn pyramid. It's the most intuitive, it's the most stable, it's the easiest to build. Just think about it. Just think about logistics for a second. Go outside, try to stack rocks, try to build it straight up like a skyscraper. It's not gonna work. Unless you're really good at building cairns. But no, it's not gonna work too well. But if you build a pyramid out of rocks, that's gonna work significantly better. Also, second side note, you ever notice how when people talk about these ancient alien conspiracies, they always refer to Mesoamerican or African cultures, and they're like, there's no way the Egyptians could build the pyramids. There's no way the Mayans could build pyramids. That's way too complex for them. But then again, if you look at ancient Rome or ancient Greece, nobody's aliens built the aqueducts, Nobody says that. Nobody says that aliens built the Pantheon or the Parthenon. Why? Well, because Greeks and Romans were white. They were European. Well, Mediterranean, I guess, but same thing. They only claim that Africans and Mesoamerican cultures couldn't build incredible things just because of racism that's been passed down through the generations. That's just how it is. And it's not always them meaning to be racist. It's just that's the status quo, kind of. It's normal to say that ancient Africans were less advanced than ancient Greeks, even if it's not true at all. It's stupid, though. It's really stupid and annoying, and I hate it. Ugh. Anyway, when conspiracies suggest the pyramids required outside intervention, they don't just make the story bigger, they in fact make it smaller. They've replaced human ingenuity with a shortcut explanation that removes all of the struggle, planning, error, and perseverance that the actual builders experienced. What remains is a monument that is completely divorced from the people who built it, that is floating in mystery rather than grounded in history. You guys like that? That's a good rhyme. Understanding how the pyramids were built doesn't make them any less impressive. It makes them harder to dismiss, harder to mythologize away, and harder to use as evidence that ancient people were incapable of shaping their own world, when in fact, they absolutely were.
9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Well, that's all I got for Egypt in this video, but I do want to go into why conspiracy thinking is quite literally addictive, and how the government uses that against us. So I talked about it at the beginning of my last video, but that video, as of the recording of this, only got like 100 views, so I'm guessing not everybody watching this one has seen that. Conspiracy theories don't spread because people are stupid. They spread because they feel good. And that feeling does have a biological explanation. The human brain is incredibly good at detecting patterns. It's a machine built for survival, not necessarily built for truth. When we notice a connection, even if it's a false connection, our brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in gambling, social media scrolling, winning a game. That little rush isn't a reward for being correct, it's just a reward for feeling like we figured something out or accomplished something. Conspiracy narratives are especially effective because they combine several powerful triggers at once. They create a clear villain, which activates the amygdala and sharpens attention. They promise hidden knowledge, which activates curiosity and anticipation. And they offer cognitive closure, which, in a confusing world, can reduce anxiety by turning uncertainty into intention. You guys know how we are as humans. We need to know everything, even if it's wrong. We would rather have some sort of villain than just accept that the world kind of sucks. So instead of everything just being chaos, our brain looks for a plan. Instead of randomness, there's always a culprit. And that offers us emotional relief, and it becomes reinforcing even if the explanation is incorrect. Social media algorithms amplify this effect by feeding the brain a constant stream of novel discoveries. Each new video or post acts like you're pulling a slot machine. Most are pretty forgettable, but occasionally one hits the emotional jackpot. Over time, the brain learns that outrage and revelation are rewarding, while patience and nuance feel dull by comparison. And by the way, this process happens to all of us, not just broken or gullible people. It just means that we're human. Our brains evolved to spot threats and form stories quickly, not to evaluate peer-reviewed data sets. Conspiracy content exploits that wiring by presenting speculation as insight and suspicion as intelligence. And I'm not saying this as an excuse for harmful beliefs, like, still sucks. They're still wrong. I'm just trying to explain why arguing facts rarely works in these circles. We're not just challenging ideas, we're interrupting a reward loop. We're trying to stop an addiction. Okay, so now that we know how they work, let's figure out how they're used against us, because they are. There's a comforting belief that conspiracy theories exist in opposition to power, that they're a form of rebellion against governments and institutions. And sometimes it's true. But history shows us something far less intuitive. Governments often benefit from conspiracies, encourage them, or quietly allow them to spread when they serve a purpose. Not because conspiracies reveal too much, but because they redirect attention away from what actually matters. One of the most effective ways to avoid accountability is to flood the environment with noise. When public attention is fragmented across dozens of dramatic explanations, it becomes harder to focus on the actual abuses of power. Real corruption tends to be boring. Well, it used to be boring, now it's actually kind of interesting and even more horrible than I could have possibly imagined. But conspiracies, by contrast, are emotional, they're cinematic, and easy to spread. They replace systematic critique with spectacle. So during the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union actively engaged in disinformation campaigns that blurred the line between truth and fiction. Intelligence agencies understood that confusing the public could be just as effective as persuading them. When citizens no longer know what to believe, they are less likely to mobilize around specific actionable injustices. Suspicion becomes generalized rather than targeted. Interesting. I really hope I don't need to point out that that is exactly what's happening right now in the United States. That right? I don't need to point that out. We can all see that. No? Okay. Let's look at some real life examples. So after the Vietnam War, mistrust in US institutions was high. It was fueled by real lies like the Pentagon Papers. Instead of restoring transparency, parts of the state benefited from a broader erosion of trust. When everything is potentially fake, verified reporting loses its authority alongside propaganda. Now, believe it or not, there are worse governments out there than the United States, and authoritarian regimes have used this tactic even more deliberately. By encouraging wild rumors about foreign plots, secret cabals, or hidden enemies, governments redirect public frustration outward. So, economic hardship, corruption, and repression become harder to organize against when citizens are told that the real threat is everywhere, except for where they are. The enemy is often vague, omnipresent, and impossible to confront directly. Like the Soviet Union during the Cold War, China right now. For Germany in the 1930s and 40s, that hidden enemy was, it was the Jews. I made a whole video on that, and somehow people still don't understand that anti-Semitism is just propaganda. My God. These tools are also pretty effective in democratic societies like our own. Conspiracy narratives can function as pressure valves. So when people channel anger into speculative theories about shadowy forces or aliens, they are less likely to engage with the mundane but effective tools like voting, labor organization, journalism, or legal action. Conspiracy theories feel like resistance, but they're really not. Do you really think that looking for aliens or Bigfoot is actually threatening anybody in power? No, of course not. In some cases, it actively protects them by diverting your attention elsewhere. This is why certain conspiracies are tolerated, while others are aggressively suppressed. The deciding factor isn't the truth, but it is utility. Narratives that undermine specific institutions, name real individuals, or expose verifiable misconduct tend to face resistance. You know, like the other week when the US government tried to cover up an ICE agent murdering some guy. Yeah, we all saw it. We all know what happened. But some news outlets, probably paid for by our government, were forced to put out some interesting takes on the whole situation, and they essentially just tried to cover up the entire thing, which is insane. We don't even need to look into the past for a good example. That was, again, like 2-3 weeks ago. Love that. But yeah, some of these conspiracies that are crazy, these narratives that spiral into abstraction, you know, with secret global orders or unknowable masterminds, ancient plots, the Jews. Oh my God, I hate people. They diffuse responsibility so that no one can actually be held accountable. Instead of looking at the people that are actually causing harm, we're looking everywhere else, and it's the most infuriating thing. Power becomes invisible and untouchable. I hate how good of a job they're doing at just not facing any responsibility for the bad things that are happening in this world. It's something else. And there's also like a whole feedback loop with social media ecosystems. Like sensationalist conspiracies, they drive engagement and clips and outrage, which benefits platforms and advertisers, and the people making the content get some money from it. Governments don't even need to invent every theory themselves. They just need to avoid correcting the ones that serve them. So none of this means that every conspiracy theory is government created or that skepticism is inherently dangerous. Skepticism is definitely necessary for a healthy society, but the problem arises when skepticism is detached from evidence and redirected away from structures of power. When people are trained to distrust everything equally, they lose the ability to distinguish between speculation and documentation. You know, a lot of people are worried about censorship in media nowadays, but the most effective form of control isn't even censorship, it's misdirection. Censorship is easy to see. Misdirection often isn't. When the public is busy chasing hidden symbols and secret bloodlines or ancient cover-ups, they're not asking who wrote the policy, who funded the decision, who benefited financially. Those questions are quieter and a lot less thrilling and kind of boring, which sucks, because those are the questions that we need to be asking. And we're going to talk about social media a little bit because that is where most people get their theories. Social media doesn't just spread them, but it shapes how they evolve. Most platforms are designed to maximize engagement instead of accuracy, and they do that by learning what holds your attention and giving you more of that thing. When somebody watches, likes, or shares conspiracy content, the algorithm doesn't evaluate the claim, it evaluates the reaction. Over time, this creates an echo chamber where similar ideas repeat, escalate, and reinforce one another, while opposing information just completely disappears. So, people in this echo chamber are only getting one point of view. Anti-vaxxers are only seeing anti-vaxxer content. So no longer is anybody challenging their beliefs. Their beliefs are just being reinforced over and over and over again by different people, making it seem like consensus when in fact it is absolutely not. And this segues into what I need from you guys. Because I'm actually working on a new social media platform. It's going to be called Melee. We are developing version 1.0 here in a couple of weeks, but it's not going to be released for a little while. But if you guys do want to support it, we are on GoFundMe, and I'll put that in the description. Basically, what we're trying to do is make Instagram, but without all the fake news, without the conspiracies, without the misinformation, and without the AI content. So any help that you could give would be greatly appreciated, even if it's just $1. If not, don't worry about it. I'm not sponsored by them, by the way. This is just a personal project that I'm trying to work on. So, thanks. I'll also subscribe, like, leave a comment, you know, all that good stuff. I'm going to try to keep making videos like this, so keep an eye out for those. Anyway, let's finish this up.
Oh, come on, Tom. Let's finish this the way we started. Together!
Curiosity is one of the best traits that we have as humans. It's what drove us to cross oceans, build monuments, and ask questions long before we had reliable answers. Conspiracies often begin in that same place. A genuine desire to understand a world that feels complex, unfair, or out of reach. And the problem isn't curiosity itself. The problem is what happens when curiosity stops being disciplined by evidence, context, or empathy. Sometimes harmless sounding theories can carry real consequences when they reshape how we view history, or expertise in one another. When ancient achievements are explained away, when living cultures are diminished, when mistrust becomes indiscriminate, when accountability disappears, when speculation replaces focus, power goes unchallenged, None of this requires bad intentions either. It just requires stories that feel better than the truth, and environments that reward emotion over understanding. This doesn't mean that we should stop asking questions or exploring the unknown. It just means that we should be asking better ones, questions that point toward human capability rather than away from it, questions that narrow responsibility instead of dissolving it, questions that accept uncertainty without filling it with fear. Wonder doesn't have to come at the cost of truth, and skepticism doesn't have to turn into cynicism. The past is already astonishing without outside saviors or aliens. Reality is already complicated without hidden masters or the Illuminati, and curiosity, when paired with humility and care, doesn't weaken our understanding of the world, it just deepens it. That's the difference between being curious and being consumed. And it's a difference that is worth holding on to. And I will leave you with this. As the infamous Milo Rossi has said, and as I keep saying in these videos, you don't need to create an evil shadow government to be mad at. You can just be mad at the regular government. Peace.